Hello everybody, welcome to Primus. This is another program, B for Belarus, and we're here with Vlad Baranich. Vlad, hello.
Hello.
Vlad is a country consultant and media analyst, and he owns media outlet Expat BY. So welcome to his information platform where you can read a lot about the situation in our country, different stuff. Today our program will be dedicated to one major theme, which is why do Belarusians cling to the past? Lukashenko as the president of Soviet Belarusians. Do you agree with that statement that Lukashenko has been in power for more than 25 years, and I don't think that he would be able to make it without at least somewhat or more than half of the support of the population?
Well, initially when he came to power, he was democratically elected. I remember because I was working as a media analyst with OCSC, with this ODIHR, how it's called, ODIHR. Well, it's this monitoring group. They usually they monitor elections in different countries, and I was monitoring radio, but I could see other results. And yes, he was very popular at the time, and he was popular on the sentiment of the Soviet past because he just took it over, this faded banner of the Soviet Union. Actually, he was wearing the banner of the old Soviet Parliament.
Restoration of the glorious past. He promised everything to everybody. He promised to restore justice, to make factories and plants work, to combine the best of the two worlds, capitalism and socialism. And for many Belarusians, I think that was like a dream world, dreamland, where they found somebody who could deliver. And for many years, when you remember the 1990s with ruthlessness, lawlessness, injustice, salaries of $20-30 a month, Lukashenko looked like a savior.
Yeah, well, he was kind of Soviet messiah.
Yep.
He was just playing this Soviet nostalgia, and actually, that time they just came out from the Soviet Union. We have to remember that. What is important here to understand, which new generation is not aware of, and especially foreign analysts and specialists who try to analyze what's going on in Belarus, they don't know this, but you have to remember that independence came to Belarus is out of the blue. It just nobody expected it, and actually most of the population didn't want it. If you go to remember there was Gorbachev referendum to preserve the Soviet Union in 1991.
Like 90% of Belarusians
and I think
voted.
It was like in February of 1991, somewhere just closer to the collapse of the Soviet Union. But there was all the popular referendum for the whole Soviet Union, and I don't remember exact figures, but the population of Belarus, they voted for preservation of Soviet Union. It was about 90%, or 80 or 90%, I'm not sure, but it was not less than 80%.
Overwhelming majority of the population supported the idea of restoration or preserving the Soviet Union.
So it means it asked against the independence.
So independence, economic freedom, political freedom.
And, until now, maybe recently they have changed something, but until now we can see that Lukashenko goes to Moscow to solve problems.
Oh, he didn't. He's been doing that for 25 years.
Yeah,
and
this is
in February in 2020
we've seen this in Soviet times. Moscow was the center, and everybody from Minsk, they were going there. And when this independence came, they were, they were lost. They didn't know what to do.
Wait, but I think that Belarusians, even like 30 years ago and 20 years ago, and even now, they are looking for a shepherd, somebody, a guiding star, somebody to guide them to better life, to full employment, to stability, to good pensions, everything good which can be delivered not through hard work, independent work in the family, but through some political force on the top of the state. And in this case, in the mentality of Belarusians, they behave and they feel like sheep rather than independent human beings who take responsibility for their lives.
I wouldn't compare that for sheep. Sheep are quite,
Look at that metaphor, shepherd and sheep.
Lovely animals.
Yeah.
So, here is the model, what we see in Belarus is the model of what was called in Soviet times kolkhoz, collective farm. And actually Lukashenko was the director of the Sovkhoz, which was, version of state-owned collective farm. So it is the same, just he was actually the boss of the collective farm. So the whole model of Belarus he built, and he could, all his bosses around him, they know only one model, this collective farm.
That's right.
And that's natural for most of the population, because most current, city dwellers, they came from villages. Actually, after the war, all city population came from villages.
Yeah, rural population equaled the urban population 1980,
yes.
74,
yes.
Right.
And so if we compare it to the mentality, you see, collective farms, those peasants, they are not just peasants. If you talk about the villages, which people from villages moving to cities, that's not that just ordinary. Let's say if you take farmers in United States, they would move to cities. No, those were collective farmers, what they call kolkhozniki.
That's right, but these kolkhozniki, it was like Belarus, in the mentality of Belarusians, most of Belarusians. So they live in the collective farm, so they understand the relations between head of the collective farm and peasants and people who live there. For them, Lukashenko as president was an embodiment of a boss of a big collective farm of the whole country.
Yes.
So, and all other people in this hierarchy of power were like directors appointed by Lukashenko to take care of fields, plants, employment, schools, healthcare, everything. So the mental model in the heads of Belarusians is still the same. That's why Lukashenko still is running for president for the 6th time.
That's mentality, you see, sadly, that's mentality of serfs. They have the boss, like in collective farm, the chairman of collective farm is called that time, or director of sovkhoz, and he would take care of every needs. For example, somebody needs fodder for the cow. They would go there to ask him, and he would give them over the extra land or some loan or to build a house. I remember when I was, in Soviet times, the time it was Soviet Union collapsed, but it was still there. It was still there, 91, when I graduated from the university, and I was working as the teacher. And that time there was common practice to send students the first month, instead of studying at the university, they would be sent to fields to dig potato and to do other agricultural works, just to help those failing collective farms. But they didn't have enough manpower to do that. And so at that time, I was just watching it myself, like that time, I remember there was due to Gorbachev's policy of sobering population, it was kind of prohibition here, and it was lack of alcohol in stores. I remember I needed a few bottles. It was like a hard currency. I needed a few bottles to pay for some services in that collective farm. So I went to that boss of the collective farm and said, "Give me prescription." I mean, it's like a note to the local shop that they sell me two bottles of vodka. Just amazing. Nobody could believe it now. But that was like that. He was ordering, even selling vodka.
Redistribution system, like natural exchange. But I think that when Soviet Union collapsed about 30 years ago, right? So a long time ago. Still, this pattern is in the heads of Belarusians, and it's like, why didn't Soviet Belarusians turn into European Belarusians, modern Belarusians? Is it because of school brainwashing that goes on and old teachers still there? Is it because of propaganda people, ideologues that allegedly there are over 10,000 of them in Belarus, and some of them are very well paid? Is it because of the monopoly of the government and the state over all mass media? Even Lukashenko yesterday talked about the importance of introducing something like Belarusian BBC to inform Belarusians about the things in the world, because we are living in the world of fake news, deep new fakes, and information warfare. Because Belarusians can freely go out. They can travel around the world. They can watch many pieces of news channels. They can read dailies and weeklies from all over the world. The exposure to the world now is immeasurably much bigger, broader than it was 30 years ago. Still, this Soviet Belarusian is the main archetype of a person in our country. That is why Lukashenko is still on the top. That is why his policies are more or less popular, and Belarusians are gullible and so easy to be led to whatever other version, incarnation of collective farm Lukashenko can propose.
I've been thinking about this phenomena. I call it cloning. It's like cloning, because when I go out on streets, and I try to look at people on streets, just generally, like like I would see the same people I would see 30 years, 40 years ago. It's like they've been cloned. Nothing has changed. The same babushkas and dedushkas and the same middle-aged men and women. They look different, but the expressions and the pattern of behavior is the same. It's like they've been cloned, and I've been thinking about it. How does it happen? And I think the thing is, it's really the family is the core, because they have a role model. Like I wouldn't be, so specific for my kids, for example. I'm very, liberal in all respects, and I would never impose my will and whatever. And but I see in them, to my surprise, that they imitate me in thinking, in behavior. That's what the role model is. That's how I was imitating my father.
Like, for example, intelligentsia is in its best, right? So people who are well educated, well trained, well informed, they know the world, and they try to pass this information to their kids. At the same time, you have educational institutions that teach different things. They do not foster and enhance critical thinking, rather than remembering and repeating different things that teachers say.
See, that's right. When we talk about Soviet Union, that time it was Iron Curtain. We had the only independent source of information, those foreign voices like Voice of America, BBC World Service, and they were jammed. But I began listening to them through this jamming when I was 14. Well, because my father was listening to them, it is just again the role model, but at the same time, I remember when those my classmates, most of them, they were listening to it, because we had a kind of elite of school, and our kids were big bosses, and usually those big bosses they they had their own community, let's say. It was anti-Soviet, actually, ironically. But for the rest of population, they were concerned mostly about this junk, which we now see it abundantly on TV, these talk shows, stupid talk shows, all this stupid pop music, and all these stupid programs.
Everything that somehow makes brain power dull.
Yes.
And so essentially one of the features of modern Soviet Belarusians is their inability to work with information. They do not understand how to process it. They don't understand what sorts of information are valid, science-based, and how to tell a fake from reality. This is so obvious that people like Lukashenko, he says that Belarus should defend itself from information warfare, but propaganda and warfare has been going on inside the country for 25 years.
Right.
And it's being done on taxpayers' money, and taxpayers seem not to care about it.
Well, again, I tell you, it's they're clones. These kids, they're clones. I mean, mentally, they're clones of their parents. And parents, they were, well, let's use term not stupid, but intellectually are not very developed, I would call it, in terms of independent mentality. That's how they would be interested in something other than like say some new, these models on TV, or the private life of popular singers, which is actually intellectually is a junk. But they would devour it, and they would live on this. Because now, when we have this open, absolutely ocean of information.
Yeah, exactly.
They still consume this junk. There's one guy from Minsk. He's called. His family name is Bumaga. It's like a paper. But I thought it was nickname. But it's
Vlad Paper.
Man, he now has 14 over. About
15 million
subscribers on YouTube. Of course, not only, but he's from Minsk, and
unbelievable.
I tried to
longing for stupidity.
And I looked what he proposes. That's absolute junk. If I were a kid, I would never watch this because it was so stupid for me at that time. Because I was reading, my father was subscribing. Magazines, popular technical magazines like Popular Mechanics, for example, and it was a Soviet version of it. Right. I was reading them. It was interesting for me because new realms.
You belong to the elite, to the Soviet elite, right? No doubt about it.
Well, I mean,
but Volodya,
yes.
I think that's about this Soviet nature of modern Belarusians. When you look at even at the different attitude to change, to other people, to civic political activism. For example, like maybe this is the way life should be. Може так і треба, right, in Belarus. Or my house is in the outskirts and I know nothing.
Yes.
Моя хата с краю, я ничего не знаю. This is like the attitude. So epistemologically, Belarusians try to hide themselves from any new disruptive information if it just has some slight potential of disrupting its old habits and old style of living. And how could Belarusians survive in the modern world when everything changes so fast? The age of disruption, the age of uncertainty. You must use your brain power. You must improve your methodology of analyzing information. But in the core of the Soviet culture of Belarusians is this fear, suspicion to information and to any new information like YouTube. Blood Bumaga is like for channeling time and energy of young people. This is the way, right? This is the way to make kids stupid, politically inert, uninterested in real meaningful things.
Well, there are so many questions in this one question. See, Belarusians, we already mentioned, they're peasants mostly. We came from peasantry, and you see the nature of peasants.
My parents were peasants. My grandparents were peasants.
They're very conservative.
They're different. They live in the western part of Belarus, but at the same time, every Sunday they put on their best clothes to go to the church. They celebrated different church holidays. They always keep their premises, their field, their yard clean and tidy. That was like the culture of the attitude to property. But somehow now people in Belarus have no idea about property rights. They still believe that big government, embodiment with Lukashenko as embodiment of big government, can take care of everything, and they kind of, they are full of joy when Lukashenko criticizes different начальники, nomenclatura, bosses, directors of collective farms, when they say, go put them behind bars without any decision of the court, they deserve to be almost hanged.
Well, that's desire of people to see justice. So this justice is instant justice, let's call it. I think it would be popular anywhere in the world. Just this mass population, they are not different from, say, I don't know, those who elect Trump, for example. Trump resembles me Lukashenko very much. Looks like, I don't know, looks like Trump was pupil of Lukashenko in many aspects, how he behaves there.
Donald Trump is Alexander Lukashenko adjusted to American standards.
Yes, sadly, but that's where biblical phrase, how mighty have fallen, came to my mind. Mm-hmm. And, in Belarus, Belarus was on the crossroads of wars and between West and the Moscow Empire, mm-hmm. and Belarusians always have been exterminated, and so this peasants' conservatism, it just merged with the human instinct for survival, mm-hmm. and so they are survivors actually. Mm-hmm. They are kind of this naturally born survivalists.
But it was okay to survive after the Second World War, right? Because there was very harsh economic conditions, social conditions. But right now, when there's no war, you can go abroad, you can really work and get paid for whatever services you want to be an IT expert, programmer, you can be a teacher, you can excel in so many things and get paid, well, not $500, even more. So there's no imminent danger of hunger, of life-threatening circumstances. We don't even have viruses that threaten China and the whole world. Yeah. At the same time, Belarusians, seem to be isolationists, escapists. And in their escapism, Lukashenko is the most active politician and their most active neighbor, somebody whom they treat as their own, unlike Putin even. Because Putin is considered to be, he's a leader of Russia, but Russia, surprise, surprise, is considered by many more Belarusians today than 30 years ago as an alien foreign country.
Right.
We are different right now. We have our own identity. We are Belarusians. Though, another interesting part of this Soviet mentality trap Belarusians are in is the attitude to entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. You remember this? Another thing that is very difficult to translate and to render for foreigners. Infested fleas.
Yes.
Allows fleas.
Yes.
Вшивые блохи.
Yes.
Something that, again, and very many Belarusians rejoiced when they heard Lukashenko say that, because they, again, despised entrepreneurs. They hated entrepreneurs for being too successful, too rich, too showing off, too arrogant sometimes. And they do not realize that entrepreneurs are the source of jobs, innovation, progress, economic growth, and taxes that are used to pay salaries for teachers, doctors, and pensions.
All right. to add to this, his vocabulary recently enriched with fat cats about bankers.
Oh, fat cats is universal. It's
right. But
every communist in the world uses these fat cats about bankers and
now he uses
billionaires.
So that's how he enriched his vocabulary. And actually, his vocabulary is very interesting. It is it's a slang of those of inmates, of prison inmates, and actually all his, this vocabulary about. So it's another feature of that. The psychology. When you ask, about, rhetorically, of course, you ask about this. How does it? How it became possible? With people thinking so and behaving in such a way. I would call it something like inborn, it's like they're cloning this,
right.
From generation to generation. It's like on the level of archetypical level, I would say, because, mother and son, it's like, it's famous sayings about mother and sons, or mother and daughters, father and son. They just pass on their... Again, role models. They live in the family. They see how their parents behave. So this is the whole complex of attitude toward life.
Yeah, but this is something, again, perverted, because you look at the role model in the family, right? You have a father, mother, grandparents living with their grandsons, like 3 or 4 of them, and they live together. This is their house. This is how they work. This is like a work dynasty, whatever. But in case of Lukashenko, this is definitely not a role model for the family, because he's got 2 sons from the old family, and there's nobody. He's the 3rd son, and nobody knows the mother. Officially, she has never been introduced, right? And so it's, what kind of family is it? It's like, again, the family adjusted to the Belarusian post-Soviet trauma in a way, right? And again, it's like in Belarusian way of thinking, they even right now, like probably 50 or 60% of Belarusians don't like Lukashenko to be the president for another 5 years. At the same time, when they try to formulate what they want from another president, the first thing is they say, okay, there's nobody around who can substitute Lukashenko. There's nobody who can be as strong in protecting and defending Belarus as an independent state as Lukashenko. So it like gives Lukashenko a lot of credit for what he's been doing. And then for 25 years, Lukashenko promised full employment, free education, free healthcare, full control of the media, and I do not see any huge resistance based on all these issues. There is no like clear-cut longing or demand for a libertarian liberal agenda in the Belarusian society yet. Well, how do you explain that? Because this is, if Lukashenko, as you now see, he did not lead Belarus after the civilized world, as he argued, right? But so what is the path for us in the next 20 years if Lukashenko is a bad ruler?
That's, some, I call it... irony of fate, whatever you call it, because that's really surprising, because he's definitely not a role model even for those women who used to vote for him, because he not divorced officially his wife, but unofficially divorced. He lived in, although claiming, this like making Russian Orthodox Church, very conservative church, as the established church in Belarus. At the same time, he had his younger son from other woman, out of
wedlock.
Yes, out of wedlock. And that's amazing how, I don't know, if something happens in the heads and minds of these people,
hypnotized.
I can't, that's enigma for me, because that's something I can only explain it supernaturally, that the creator decided to
test Belarusians another way, right?
To mock them, to show them how stupid they are, that they chose the wrong idol or wrong god. But you see, Again, did you read the recent interview with Alexeyevich, the Nobel laureate, who is so praised as
Exactly.
And she commended Lukashenko. He's the only one, the only protector against Russian expansion.
This is the point. And essentially, with our other people who openly criticize Belarusians for their savok or the Soviet-style mentality, like, for example, Viktor Babarika from Belgazprom who said that the state, which was created by Lukashenko, does not need smart, clever people. It needs doctors who are paid $200 a month, and hockey players who are paid 20,000 rubles or $10,000 a month. This is about the priority of the state created by Lukashenko, and people seem not to care about that much because there is no. If his popularity rating was like under 10%, that was the popular protest against his rule, and I think that he would definitely reconsider his decision, or he would change the way he runs policies. But when he says, I'm ready for reforms, and people still believe that they can have free lunches without paying for this, for bureaucrats in the form of corruption, kickbacks, and enrichment of 1% of the population, that's a mentality trap, or we call it stupidity.
Well, again, I wouldn't call it stupidity. People are smart in ways. As I remember, many times I mentioned Belarusian model of doing business in general terms.
Right.
I mean, steal and cheat. So they know how to steal from somebody, no matter from its collective farm. There was collective farm to steal some stuff from there, like fertilizers or whatever, or gasoline. Now I read on some forums that they say, well, in collective farms now they call it a different way. Not collective farms, they say agro. I don't know. Something.
De facto, the same entities, right?
But the same. They say, oh, soon there will be this campaign of sowing seeds, and we'll have free gasoline or free, diesel from tractors. So that
people are outraged that gasoline is getting more expensive, 1 kopek a day, right? 1 kopek like every 2 weeks. At the same time, if they compare the price of gasoline in Poland, Lithuania, or Germany, they understand that we have very cheap gasoline.
Well, that we have to compare it with salaries, which are comparable, and so that's a different agenda. But we're talking now about the Soviet mentality, Soviet heritage. This actually general for this, I would call it Soviet sentiment. There is a good Russian word for this, sovkadrocherstvo. It means Soviet, like masturbating on Soviet
heritage.
Soviet nostalgia.
Soviet
so
heritage,
that, like Soviet times masturbators, let's say, Soviet idea masturbators.
Very rude.
Well, that's the term in Russian, and to understand it, because very seldom I can meet somebody of my age, of our age, we're the same age, and they are so nostalgic about the Soviet times. They say everything was fine then, there was free education. Man, they were kind of, half of their brain dead because they don't remember all those terrible things which happened.
They stopped learning when they graduated from university. That's the problem.
Yes.
And we realize that the world is changing so fast that with this Soviet-style mentality, we are trapped in like double, triple fence around ourselves. And this is something that we turned into this enigma wrapped in mystery, and so few people understand what Belarusians really want. Do they want to have some freedom, or do they want to have a better shepherd, a better tyrant, a better collective farm director? This is another kind of trap. I think that's another result or outcome of this Soviet-style mentality is the way we behave in the streets. Lenka Bartakova Czech basketball player who plays for Minsk Smoky, like a Dragons.
Yes.
She says that this poker face is a kind of a defense reaction of Belarusians in front of the whole world. So we have this poker face, gloomy, unsmiling, unpleasant, kind of we try to isolate ourselves in the whole world, not because we are bad people, but because this is the way we don't want the whole world to interfere with what our inside world is. And there's this kind of lack of communication because the inside world and the outside world gives the result in the form of stagnation, conserving a Soviet-style mentality, because we don't want to question what we believe in, our views of the world. And as a result, it's much easier for Lukashenko or whatever politicians to cheat on us using modern techniques, using different words, giving different promises, but still we are in the same kind of model of relations between the government and the people.
You know, what's interesting when you talk about, I think we're in making some exaggeration, because we try to extrapolate all this model on all population. You see, those young people who now come into the world, their dream number one, everybody knows this, the Belarusian dream. I have a dream. To go to the West.
I've never heard a Belarusian say
live
like
Belarus, to live Belarus for good, and forget about it. That's actually one of the features.
Put on embroidered T-shirt, vyshivanka once a year, and say, well, "I'm proud to be Belarusian."
Doesn't matter if you listen to those leaders of Belarusian diaspora, like in the United States, anywhere in the world, they all complain that Belarusians come and say to the United States, they forget that they're Belarusians and they easily integrate into the United States, and they melt it in that that in their society
without any resistance.
That's the reason, because Belarusians, I remember how Khrushchev commanded Belarusians. He said they're the best Soviet people, because they have no feelings about their national identity, and they will be the first who built communism. So the same we see now. Instead of communism, it was the globalization, and they aspire. The main idea for them now is something to live good.
That's right.
And to live good with minimal efforts.
Personal achievement.
Those who are left here, they
strategy, without responsibility. This is it. To live good, to have everything that is convenient, and let president or the government deliver.
Yes, without efforts on their own.
Yep,
and
exactly.
And not even efforts. They can work hard, but the main thing they are not willing to take responsibility. This is the hardest, to take responsibility for their thinking, for their actions, and
for their political choice. And very, very few Belarusians understand that when they are dissatisfied with something, level of education, level of health care, low pensions, they do not realize that this is directly connected with the political choice they make. And if they understand that, well, politicians make decisions on the architecture of pension system or health care, or they can design the system that would highlight personal responsibility. So if you work hard, if you educate your kids, if you make them good, intelligent people, right? So by the end of your life, you are bound to be prosperous, to have a good life. But if you don't do that, if you believe that somebody else, another person's uncle can deliver, this is a major mentality, psychological trap we are in.
Well, that's serfs mentality. Slaves, they don't have to care about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Everything, their master is in charge of everything. So if you have good master, so everything is fine. Your life is good. If you have bad master, well, that's unfortunate. And so that's what we have. The aspirations for this in Lukashenko, they see this good master. Maybe they're not the best, but the other could be worse, and he would.
Right. So, to summarize, I would have this analogy with Shrek.
Yeah.
So, he said, "This is my swamp." So, Belarusians, I don't know how strong and loud they can say, "This is my swamp," meaning their own country. Still, that would be a very important identity move forward, because we are not like Russian swamp, we are not Soviet swamp. So the mentality changes slowly, but still I think that we are much closer today to Belarusians saying this is my swamp, meaning their own country. Still swamp, but still my. This is very important progress, but I think that the pace of progress is so slow. 25 years for identity move that took Poles, Bulgarians, Lithuanians, 10 years or 5 years or even less time. But here, I think that probably that can give us some optimism for the next 25 years.
Ironically, swamp is a very good word here, very good metaphorical word, because, I've been using this word swamp for, I don't know, for 40 years maybe now, since my childhood, because Belarus it's called swamp, where you get in and we're engulfed and you sink and you can't get out of it. It's like marshes. Belarus used to be a marshland. Mm-hmm. So it was, now they're irrigated and they're dried, but anyway, just Belarus and swamps, it's like synonyms. Mm-hmm. It's like forests and swamps. Right. And so this is the mentality. One of the classics of Belarusian literature is people on the swamps, or in the it was a village where people lived around this marshland and the swamps. And another thing is the Belarusians another ironical thing with the irony of fate or whatever we would call it, that this inspired Belarusians for escapism.
Escapism, right.
Escapism is like kind of mentality, or to escape from reality. The number one tool for escapism, this World of Tanks game, originates from Belarus. Isn't it funny?
Exactly. And so I think that Volodya and I are urging you to march away from the Soviet-style marsh, which is, again, swamp.
Yes.
Marching from the marsh.
Plain words. Yes.
Right. Thank you, Vlad, for your input to the program. Vlad Baranich, country consultant and media analyst, was with me, and that was the theme. Why do Belarusians cling to the past? Lukashenko as the president of the Soviet Belarusians. And we don't know where and how Belarusians will march in the next 25 years. Hopefully, they will realize that the first part, they realize is very important, my swamp. So the second part would be in the next 25 years that we don't want to live in a swamp or on the swamp. We want to live in a civilized, flamboyant, dynamic territory in the center of Europe.
Yes, I agree. Hopefully, new generation will choose another way. Yes.
Thank you, guys. See you next time on Primus and the program Be for Belarus. Goodbye.
Goodbye.